Well, hello, Sister Shelley. That was a beautiful, beautiful introduction. I believe you were on mute. I couldn't hear you over here, but I could feel you with your words. So thank you so much for the introduction. Well, listen, hello and welcome to Tea Talk. I'm Lady O. I'm your hostess or host, however you like to say it. And I'm so excited today because today we have a wonderful, wonderful guest for you today. So I want to tell you who she is so that you can start sharing with your friends, get everybody you know on today because this is an historic moment, but it's going to be informative and you definitely don't want to miss it, and you don't want your family, your friends, your children and grandchildren to miss it. So go ahead and have them sign on. We are going to be getting to know about a historic woman that I've known for some time, but I still am just in awe of her every time I talk with her about how God has used her. And so we'll introduce her a little bit later, but I want to give you time to go ahead and share with your friends and get some people on. Her name is Dr. Joye Carter, and she is a historic woman, guys. She is, listen to this, you're going to get more too, but just to give you a little, like an appetizer of what you're going to be hearing here, she is the first Black American physician to be appointed as a chief medical examiner. Did you hear me? The first. Okay. So we're celebrating Women's History Month this month, and she is our Woman of the Year. So you're going to hear her personally, and she is just a joy to know, even though that's her day. She is a joy to know and just a miracle that God has given to us. And we want to get to know her and hear from her. So go ahead and start sharing with your friends. Call somebody, tell them get on. Tea Talk is on. And we will be starting in just a minute to get to know her very well. And then once you get to know her, you're going to want to share this message with everybody, for something that we will all cherish for years to come. You can see I have my yellow flowers here because spring is on the way. It is March, but not only spring, it's Women's History Month, and that's why we have Dr. Joy here to honor her and to celebrate her. And so today for tea, I've got a new cup, and it's got my initial on it. It's a cup that I was given. My father passed away a couple of weeks ago, and of course, he is from Tyler, and he bought me several yellow roses. So this is in honor of him. I have my yellow blanket, and my drink for today is a smoothie that's got tea in it and coffee, and it's cold. So get your tea ready. It doesn't have to be hot today. It needs to be cold because it is hot outside, right? So grab your tea and settle in, for we are about to embark on a wonderful time together on Tea Talk with our honored guest today. So without further ado, I'm going to ask you, Tea Talk, to bring her on with your claps and your praises. Dr. Joye Carter. Hello, Dr. Joy.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much, Lady O. We've known each other for
I
a
know,
long
I
time.
know. We have
Always.
had some wonderful times together, and I never forget the first time you brought a dish to the Thanksgiving dinner, and it was brownies. And I said, the medical examiner cooks, and she cooked brownies, and they were so delicious. So we've had some wonderful family times together, Christmas and Thanksgiving, and so it's so great to see you again. You look wonderful.
Thank you. So do you.
God has been good to us, right?
Yes, he has.
Well,
Every day.
well, listen, we honor you today as our Woman of the Year for Tea Talk. And we're going to spread it all over the world, tell them this is our Woman of the Year. So, congratulations to you. And thank you for all that you've given to pave the way for so many women like us.
Thank you for honoring me. And I'm just doing what God told me I was going to be doing and loving every
Okay.
day.
Well, that kind of gets me right to the very beginning of our segment. What I want you to do, first of all, can you explain what a medical examiner is?
Oh, absolutely. A medical examiner is a term for a medical doctor who has specialized in forensic pathology when they are employed by a government entity to determine how citizens die. So the correct term is actually forensic pathologist. But when you're employed by a government entity, whether it is a county, state, or federal organization, the term is medical examiner, which is far
Okay.
different from a coroner or a justice of the peace.
Okay, a coroner or what?
Justice of the peace.
I think of justice of the peace has been somebody that marries you, but is that the same thing?
It's a little bit different.
Okay, okay. We don't want to get people thinking that you can marry them, okay?
Oh no, no, I said that. Yeah, we are different from that, but
Oh,
in
different from that.
life,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, great, great, great. So pretty much from what you just said, you are like a coroner, but you're a medical doctor, which means you've had to go to medical school
correct.
and earn certain skills and degrees to be able to do something that more than what a medical doctor does. You
Yes.
are a coroner. So, I told you one of my favorite shows that I get in trouble with Bishop for watching back to back to back is the ID station because I'm always interested in how do people die? How did this happen? So, is that kind of what you do to determine how people die or when you do the
Well,
autopsy?
a forensic pathologist actually performs an autopsy or a post-mortem examination. We are the last physicians to lay hands on the body to determine how someone has died. And
Mhm.
then we create that legal record, which can never be destroyed. You know, medical hospital records are kept for 20 years or so, but records on death, which is a vital record, are never destroyed. So we do the medical procedure of autopsy, meaning look at self, where you look at the condition of the body, the internal organs, any wound pathways, and what disease has done to the body and the body's reaction to that to determine what has happened. We are one of the few non hospital based medical specialties because we are like a bridge between the treating physician and the family, or the family and law enforcement, or even the family and their insurance company, or even from the media. So we are there to explain what happened to their loved one, first of all, to the family, and then secondarily to all those other entities.
Oh, wow. That is an excellent, excellent explanation. I mean, it really helps us to understand. And I mean, we have to have you guys for so many reasons, as you said, whether or not it was an accidental death or homicide or suicide, all of those kind of things you guys are helping to make sure. We had a young lady who passed away last year and family didn't want to do an autopsy, but Bishop was saying you need to find out what happened to her. And then when they did, they were able to find out what happened to their loved one, which put their minds at ease as to what happened, to know, right?
Correct. Correct.
So this is really great. Okay, so now tell me, as a little girl growing up, did you know anything about a medical examiner or a coroner or anything like that? How did you first get into wanting to be this kind of a doctor?
Well, I got the notion to become a doctor when I was 6 years old.
Oh,
I was one of the recipients of the first mumps, measles, rubella vaccination.
okay.
Mine did not take. So I contracted measles a second time and nearly died. And I had measles encephalitis, which is inflammation of the lining of the brain. And I was quarantined at home. And our family doctor stood over me thinking that I was unconscious. He told my parents that there's nothing they could do and I was probably going to die.
Wow.
And he said, the only thing you can do is pray. I
Okay.
heard everything he said, and I heard my parents praying, my grandparents praying, and I guess he thought I just couldn't hear anything. And my fever broke, and I survived, obviously, and that made
Wow.
me want to become a doctor. And I promised I'd never stand over a patient and talk about them, not knowing they could hear or not. And so that's when I got the idea to become a physician. And I'm from a very tiny town in Ohio, less than 5,000 people, called Wellsville.
Okay.
And my family moved to Indianapolis, Indiana in
Oh,
1972 when I started high school. And I was exposed by mistake to an autopsy in between my freshman sophomore year of high school. That's also when I met Mrs. Pat and Mr. Charles Smith, who became my godparents. So
okay,
a
stop
lot of
right
things
there. How did
happened.
you get introduced to an autopsy at what age? Just you got to stop there a
14.
minute. How did that happen?
Um, I expressed my desire to become a doctor to my appointed guidance counselor, who was
Uh-huh.
a white male. And he immediately said, I would never make a good doctor. And I have no idea why he said that.
Mhm.
I'm like, you don't know me. You know nothing about my skills. And I walked out of his office and I ran into a wonderful lady named Mrs. Green, older woman. She was a guidance counselor, but not mine. And I told her about my experience. She said, oh, I've got something for you. And so they had a program sponsored by Eli Lilly's, which is based in Indianapolis, an immersion program into medicine. And so I got assigned to a Catholic hospital, maybe about a mile from our home. And I was down in the lower level. This is back in the 70s, and they still had nuns in the Catholic hospital. And I'm walking down the hall reading, and the nuns were wheeling a body into the morgue. And I
Mhm.
was 14. And the nuns were saying, you don't want to see this. This is scary, frightening. And I'm not frightened at all. I'm 14. I'm curious. And that's how it started. I begged my way into the autopsy, and it was life changing.
Were you scared? Did you have nightmares afterwards? What happened? I mean, how did you feel after you had just seen an autopsy at 14?
I was not afraid. Shortly before that, I had gone to church with Pat Smith and Gail Smith. I had joined Second Christian there in Indianapolis, now called Light of the World. And
Okay.
I knew the Bible. I knew what's left is not the body.
Okay.
It's not the person, just the
Right.
body. The soul has passed on. So I didn't have any fear of that. But watching the autopsy and listening to the doctor describe the injuries, um, do the dissection of the body, showing the injured areas, and then I sat as he talked to the family, gave them comfort and closure. I knew that's what I was going to do.
Wow.
Um, when my
That
mother
is
picked me up
amazing.
that day, and my
Your
mother
mother.
was like, how did you see an autopsy? And I told her, and I said, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do. And
Oh
so
my
it just
goodness.
fit everything I wanted to do.
Now, what did your mom say? Was she scared? I mean, if my 14-year-old daughter had come home and told me she saw an autopsy, I would probably be living like, oh, how could they let that happen to my sweet little baby? What did your mom say?
Oh, she was not happy.
Okay.
My mother was very squeamish, but she also knew I was determined.
Yeah.
And I told her, this was the whole beauty of it because you're not causing harm.
Mhm.
And I was always kind of nerdy and scientific as a little girl.
Okay.
And so she knew that's what I wanted to do. And so she
Wow.
said, if that's what you want to do, then read up on it, see if that's what you really, really want to do. So that's
Wow.
how it started.
That is a story, and I didn't know that story. so, uh, you mentioned some very, very dear family members to us, so we have to give them honor today as well. Mama Pat and Brother Charles Smith and Gail. We all call ourselves. Well, they're like my mom and dad, and so when my mom and dad were gone, that's who was my mom and dad for me. And then Gail was my sister. And then when I met you, you became like my sister too, because we would all meet at somebody's house, whether it's mostly theirs, the
Yeah.
Smiths, and we would have Christmas dinner and fun together or Thanksgiving dinner. And then when I started having it at my house, we had it over here. And then we had it at your house one year, I remember.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
had eggnog. It was really a very big spread. So we had some wonderful family times together.
Yes.
So I do want to honor them. So you said you met, that's when you first met them at a church?
Yes. Well, when my mother moved, she worked at the same school that Pat Smith worked at. So I
Okay.
met Pat first, and she put me on an assignment. And
Of
Gail
course.
and I were in high school all 4 years together, and we've been like sisters since 1972.
Wow.
Mom and Pat, I mean, mom and dad, as I call them, my second family, they were the main reason I came down to Houston. We've
Right.
always been close, and I was that second daughter. I loved them so much.
Yeah, and they loved you too. I mean, oh my God, when we would talk, Sister Pat and I talked every day. I mean, because she could talk.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yes.
She was very opinionated and very loving and nurturing. So I miss her so much, and Deacon Smith as well. But
Yes.
she is that mother figure, and I'm sure she did probably see you and just fell in love with you. And then with your daughters, you and Gail Lynn, as her mom called Gail Lynn, and she's watching, she's gonna probably say, "Why you call me Gail Lynn?" But that's what our mother called her.
Uh-huh.
And so I know you guys have been friends and are still friends to this day.
Yes.
So, like sisters, more than
Yes.
friends, I should say. We're still
Yes.
family. So, well, great, great, great. Well, listen, we give honor to Sister Pat because she's a wonderful woman that, since we're doing Women's History, she's made a difference in my life and my children. Call her grandma and so forth. So she and Brother Pat, Deacon Smith. So we give them honor. Gillian, if you're on here too, I don't know if she's watching today. I told her you were going to be on, so I'm sure she is somewhere watching.
Okay.
But let's go to, okay. So this is wonderful. So tell me though, were you like that? You said you were nerdy. Were you that student that made all A's? And is that do you have to, if somebody wants to be a doctor or follow your foot, do they have to have all A's or know all the science and biology and stuff like that?
Well, I was a straight A student.
Uh-huh.
I confess, but
Uh-huh.
I always had fun. I was that little girl that when they said on the radio it was hot enough to fry an egg on the sidewalk, I ran
Okay.
one day to one of my mother's good brown eggs and I threw it on the sidewalk, and they were lying on the media. It did not fry. So I got in trouble for that. But I would question what people said, because that's what my mother told me to do. Question.
Yeah.
You can't just accept what people tell you to do. So,
Right.
yeah, I was that kid. But what the point you raised is very important. You don't have to have straight A's. You do
Mhm.
need to know anatomy and physiology. You have to have an understanding of science because that's how we understand what happens to the body. But
Right.
generally, when you want to go to medical school, you need to be well rounded. You need to have a good academic background. You need to be able to read well and comprehend, but also be
Mhm.
able to multitask. They look for people that can handle the work and
Yeah.
maintain their lives. So, you don't have to be exactly like me. You need to be exactly like yourself and make sure it's something that you really want to do.
Right. And I think the thing that I'm hearing you too is determination. If you know that's what you want to do, you do what it takes. And what it took for you may not be the same for somebody else, but you
Agreed.
gotta make it work. You gotta multitask. And because I'm sure I've known some people that have been in medical school. I couldn't do it. But anyway, you gotta maintain a life. But
Yes.
you also got to be in those books and the intern. Give us a little synopsis of the years it took, and because I know it took a long time, but what do you go? You go from college to med school,
Well,
or
you generally do 4 years of undergrad or college, and
Mhm.
then you do 4 years of medical school. And depending on the specialty that you keep for yourself, that you select, you're going to do 3 to 7 years postgraduate medical education.
Mm,
For me, wanting to do forensic pathology meant that I really did need to know the body backwards, forwards, inside out, and all the signs that went along with it. So after medical school, I studied for an additional 6 years,
wow.
because I had my goal set to be a chief. And
Mhm.
that meant that I needed to know everything that I was going to ask somebody else to do.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's a long process, and it's not the only type of medicine that you can go into, but it was what I had already selected for myself.
Right. And so during that time, do you how do you make a living? You're in school, are you making are you having side jobs or what are you doing to make to eat?
Well, that's something else you have to think about, the fact that you're going to delay some of the things that you see your friends are growing up, and they get jobs out of college and they begin to make money. You are going to have to experience what is called delayed gratification. You have to wait
Okay.
a little bit. Now, I
Got
was a little different because right after I finished college, I joined the Air Force as an officer. I
it.
accepted a health professions scholarship,
Okay.
and the United States Air Force paid my way through medical school. I finished medical school completely debt free. I had no worries, and I
Fortunate.
was able to juggle a stipend of $400 a month. I stretched that beyond stretching, but I managed to pay for a car, insurance, um, food,
Oh
and
my goodness.
any other things I wanted, because the Air Force paid for everything else. So I didn't have to worry about funding my way through school. It was all based upon academics. Um,
Mm,
so I was very happy to do that, and I actually became the very first military officer in my family
right.
on both
And so
sides.
let's talk about the first because that's one of the I mean, you've done a lot of things, but the first, you know what I mean? I mean, I gotta ask you about these because on here I want to make sure I get it right. The first Black American to be named Deputy Chief of the Armed Forces Medical Examiners Department. The first African American. Does that mean first African American female or the first African American?
First African American.
Come on, let's get it right. I had to make that very clear. Look at you there. You're looking so handsome. Look, you're so cute, but and professional and I mean all dignified and everything. But I wanted to make that very clear because it wasn't the first female African American. It was the first African American. And so we applaud you for that. What
Thank
was
you.
that like when you knew you were with those stiletto heels or medical heels, whatever you were wearing, you were breaking that glass ceiling? What was that like?
And I was very blessed. When I discovered the field of forensic pathology and I began to read about it, as my mother always, we were readers. And I wrote to a doctor who had written articles in a journal that made sense to me as a teenager. And I said, I want to become a forensic pathologist. Will you help me? And this is in the 70s, long before personal computers or anything. So
Oh,
the only
yes.
thing this doctor knew about me was he probably guessed I was female. He didn't know if I was Black at the time. He just answered some questions. He guided me on things that I needed to do back in high school. And maybe every 3 to 6 months, I would get a letter. I'd write something else back. Um,
Let me stop you there for a minute because I'm like, you're taking me back because we didn't have computers and cell phones and Zooms. So you're saying that you wrote this doctor and this doctor is corresponding with you back through letters and he
yes.
doesn't know if you're Black or he just knows your name.
He
And
just knew that I had that desire. And we did not meet in person until I was in medical school at Howard. We met in person. That was the late Dr. Joe Davis. He was the chief medical examiner of Miami, Florida. He
and
is
he
the
was
reason. He is the reason that Florida is the only state that has a complete medical examiner system in the entire country. And he was very interested in having a Black physician in the role of a chief medical examiner. Um, and
wow.
so he kind of picked me and nurtured me. And
Mhm.
that's why I always advocate getting a mentor, someone to help you to, you know, show you the way. And the one thing that he said to me, and this is something that you can ask Gail about, but he said, you have to be able to speak to anybody.
Mhm.
Um, one person, definitely 12 members of a jury. And so he suggested that I do theater, which I did. Back in the day, Gail was the head of our theater in high school. She was just the
Was she
best.
really? She didn't have told me that. She's been hiding some talents here. I'm gonna have to talk to her about that.
But Dr. Davis would say, this is a noble field.
Mhm.
Communication skills are very important. You're talking to someone about the worst parts of their life when their loved one dies. So yeah, that stuck with me, and that's why I do suggest having a mentor that will be honest with you about the ins and outs, whether or not this really is something that you want to do.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Let me ask you real quickly. So, was he white or black?
Oh, he definitely was white.
That's
A lot
like
of people not. He was definitely white.
Florida. I'm like, what? He's got to be a white man.
He was a white male. He was a great, great, great man. We became very close. He became another kind of godfather for me.
Oh,
He loved Mahalia Jackson.
okay. Hmm.
And we were able to talk about things that I've never been able to talk about with other people. And he really mentored me. He prepared me for dealing with things that are unimaginable. And then
Mm,
being able to explain to a family, keeping that compassion, and
mm,
also living your life so that when you stop doing what you're doing, or at the end of the day, you don't let that go into your subconscious. You don't let that get the best of you, that you can renew yourself and go to work the next day and do it all over again. So I always mention him as a mentor.
right, right, right. And I know that's what you're doing now is mentoring girls. And two things I want to before I forget, because you said something earlier about your relationship with God and how that really was very impactful, in your life. And I think that would be something too. Do you think that's very important to getting through medical school and getting through your life and accomplishing all you accomplished?
It was very important to me. And the one thing I will always say is, through my 40 years of medical practice, I observed that people that have a spiritual relationship
Mhm.
have the strength more so than others to get through the death of a loved one. They
Yes.
have that inner strength. And, the title of my first book was My Strength Comes from Within. And
Mm,
I I have never tried to separate my spiritual beliefs from my ability to maintain my compassion when
mhm,
I'm doing a postmortem. My compassion and spiritual knowledge has always taught me that people are people. I'm
mhm.
not the judge, I'm not the jury. I have to respect them all. And that has always allowed me to look at my work in a way that my colleagues always haven't. It's not
Wonderful.
for me to judge. Every human being was not made by me, but every
Right.
human being grew from a seed, like all of our plants grow from seeds. So for
Mm,
me, it's always been very important, and to understand. I explain the spiritual aspect of death.
mhm,
Uh, we measure life by electrical activity. The
mm,
EKG is electrical activity of the heart.
mhm,
The EEG is electrical activity of the brain, and that's how we determine there is no life.
mm.
Add the science onto it. I know from my scientific background that energy is not destroyed, it's changed.
Mm. You got me thinking here. It's not destroyed, it's changed. And so that means it's the industry's not, it's just changed. And so that is the death.
That's correct.
Correct. I got it. I got it. Whew. Okay. Well, it's so much I could cover here, but I wanted to ask you about go back to your mentoring and we'll cover that then, the mentoring. Can you share with me maybe, because in the 70s, and I grew up in that age too, it was, we were just getting through uh, desegregation, integration, all of those things, and a lot of things were really very difficult for Black people, period. And Black women were at the tail end of it. So, what was life like back then, and how did you see it change over the years, and where do you see us now as Black women?
I always give my mother and grandmother credit for just being true to yourself.
Right.
And my grandmother would always say things like, if you don't think it, why should anybody else? Um, Prior to high school, I was educated in schools that were primarily white. And I had to have a very thick skin because I'm up there with, I was determined to do my school, get my grades, and
Mhm.
people would talk about me behind my back. And I
Mhm.
didn't care as long as they were behind my back. That's how I looked at it. You're behind my back, so get thee back, Satan.
Okay. Yeah.
I grew up with a lot of self love and self confidence. And um, my grandmother always said, if you really want to do it, prepare yourself, work for it. And
Mhm.
that's how I always attacked it. Not saying that it wasn't lonely at times, it wasn't stressful at times, but I was going to overcome. I was never going to let somebody's opinion of me
Right.
define me. My
Right.
opinion was more important of me than what other people thought of me.
Let me say something real quickly because I think you just said something that I want to really share with our parents and grandparents. Because if you instill that self esteem in your child, then when they go off to school, and sometimes even today, um, people are called we're called the N word. We're called monkeys. I mean, we just had this report here recently with the police department because of the color of our skin that people pick on us and talk about our kinky hair. And my mom really didn't know how to comb my hair when I was growing up because she had this. Hair that you could just put water on and a little grease and it would slick back. And my daddy's hair, when you put water and grease on, it's gonna like fight you, So I got picked on because my last name was Horn, and they would call me, they would say I had horns coming out with my hair. And those kind of things. Did you get picked on by white students or white parents in your community? Because I know you said that your mom and grandmother gave you that self esteem, but did it still happen to you?
Oh, yes. Um, I have to tell you, I went natural at age 11. I saw Angela Davis on TV, and I said, that's it. I'm cutting my hair. I'm going natural. And
Mhm.
I remember in the fifth grade, my fifth grade teacher tried to pick on me. And
Mhm.
she began an introduction to the history of Africa by pointing me out in the color of my skin.
Oh
And I
my.
wasn't having it. I was not having it. I remember feeling anger and shame for about 30 seconds. And then I stood up and I said, um, my mother always had things to read.
Yeah.
So she had Ebony magazine, Jet magazine, New York Times, papers. And I
Right.
stood up and I said, my skin is dark and we are protected more from aging and skin cancer than you are. And I said, no, you're probably the same age of my mother, but my mother's not wrinkled like you. So I,
And you got that
I,
bonus from your mother. I know your
I got
mother.
it from my mom, and I was in the fifth grade. I was the only student of color. And then I went to the principal's office and I called my mother. My mother was a teacher. My
Uh-huh.
mother told someone to hold her chalk. The next thing I knew, she appeared in the classroom. She walked in and she gave a lecture about Africa and the slave trade and
Right.
left that teacher, who was Mrs. McBurney, she left her mouth open.
I know
And
she
I'm
did.
like, uh-huh. But had my mother not, you know, raced us for that,
Yeah.
and had she not said, read and ask questions and then speak up for yourself. And I
Exactly.
promised myself then I will never, ever have 30 seconds of shame again,
Wow.
ever. And
Wow.
and I
Well, I love it. You got to tell this little quick story too, because when you were on trial one time to testify, which is what medical examiners and coroners do, um, and this attorney approached you as Mrs. And you were as opposed to approach you as doctor. Tell that story right quick.
Oh, that is a true story. That was Washington, D.C. And they had called the witness in, and I am the witness for the prosecution. I'm the chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C. And so they called the next witness and called Dr. Carter. I walk down and I sit in the witness stand, and then the defense attorney gets up and it says, Miss Carter. And I just looked at him. And then he said it again. And I looked over at the jury. And then he said it again. And I looked at the judge. And the judge said, why aren't you answering? And I said, you called for the next witness, Dr. Carter.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Carter came and sat down. I don't know who this attorney is talking to. And the judge got it. And then he said, you are to direct your questions to Dr. Carter. I wasn't having that. If you let that happen, that will continue to happen. And you are going to have to respect the fact that I am here on equal footing as an expert in this court, and I was not having it. No.
Good for you. I love that story. But I want to make sure that everybody understands also that you used to be here in Houston, and the first Black American physician to be appointed a chief medical examiner in the history of the U.S. Talk about that. You've got so many firsts, but there you are. Look at that.
Actually, every position I've had, I have replaced an older white male, no matter where I worked. When I came to Houston, I was hired by a unanimous vote of the commissioner's court, which I don't know how unanimous it was because two of the commissioners never actually could make eye contact with me.
I know they could.
Coming down to Texas, they'd never had a female chief medical examiner in the state.
Wow.
And of course, they've never had a Black one. So, I was a little bit much for some to deal with, but they asked me to come and clean house and improve the quality of death investigation and the numbers being done. Houston was way behind being such a large city. And so that's what I did. I really had to have some tough skin down there in Texas, but I came to do a job. And the one thing that I mentioned people don't know about is that I moved to Houston in 1996. Came directly from Washington D.C., Chocolate City, and I was disturbed that Houston, then being the fourth largest city in the country, had a segregated decedent removal program. They picked up bodies by their ethnicity, color of skin. I wasn't having that either. What? I took the time to design a body pickup service that started in my office as the chief there. And we picked up everybody and picked them up on time. So I was surprised that they'd gotten away with having that type of segregation in Houston for all of that period.
In the 90s?
In 1996 to be exact. And we put our program into effect at the latter part of 1997.
So help me to understand fully what that means. So that means that if somebody called to pick up a body that was Black, the pickup time or the pickup place, or how was it different?
White funeral homes picked up white bodies. Black funeral homes picked up Black bodies. Hispanic funeral homes picked up Hispanic people. And sometimes we'd have to wait, or there'd be some funeral home on call that didn't want to go to a certain neighborhood. And there was one time that I waited 12 hours for a homicide victim. And I was livid. I said, everything is equal in death. In my opinion, nobody gets out of life alive. And I just wasn't going to have that. So I wrote up a plan, which was received by the commissioner's court and funded by the commissioner's court. I ordered 4 vans that were outfitted to carry 4 bodies, and I
Mhm.
brought body pickup into the Harris County Medical Examiner's office back then. And we picked everybody up and got rid of that system because that just didn't make any sense to me.
Oh my goodness. Well, here another first. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carter. You're just so amazing. I mean, everywhere you go, you're blazing the trails and knocking down the ceilings and walls and so forth as a woman and as a Black woman. That's why we are just here to honor you today. So
Thank
let
you.
me ask you, what is your biggest joy or your biggest, accolade that you think about that you kind of just are so excited or want to be remembered by? Just talk to us about that. What are you're such a joy in your name and your life. Tell us about, what do you think as you reflect?
Well, I mentioned that my mom was a teacher for
Right.
50 years.
50
And
years. Oh my, I didn't know it was that long.
50 years, 50 years.
Oh,
But what gives me the greatest joy, I used to always say, I might be the first, but I'm not the last. And so
mm,
I really get joy from seeing people I've taught, students I've interacted with go on to go into whatever profession they want to go into and give
mhm.
me feedback and let me know how they're doing. I really love that. And, now that I've recently retired, I juggle mentoring male and female
Oh, wow.
across the globe. Right now I'm talking with a young Black lady who's been in medical school in Moscow, Russia.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and I have students in at least 5 different countries in Africa, and they contact me through LinkedIn, or they find my name, they send me an email, and I've got students coming from middle school on up, and they let me know how they're doing and if they're having any problems. So seeing this go on, that there will never be a time there's not a Black physician that's in medicine, or particularly in forensic pathology. There's never going to be that time again. We're here, the door has been kicked completely open, the glass is shattered, and we're in the room and we're not leaving. That's
Wow.
what gives me the joy.
Yes, yes, yes. Wonderful. And that kind of leads me to the next question I was going to ask you about. I said I'll save it for later, is the mentoring. And that's what really, it just warms my heart. At this age and stage of our lives, God has given us so much knowledge and so many opportunities and things that we collect over the years, that God kind of, some we collect, some He just dumps in our lap. But when people start to quote unquote retire, I always say you can never retire on God. What God has given you is just a different season that you shift from accumulating things to giving things back. And that's what I really was just really amazed at you when I look at what you're doing now, that you are mentoring. So talk about that, and even talk about some of these people who are trying to retire and want to sit at home and watch TV all day or whatever. How do you keep this life going, in your body, mentally, physically, and spiritually, by giving back?
Well, when I recovered from that measles encephalitis at age 6, I couldn't walk for a few months because of
Wow.
the injury to my equilibrium. So my mother put me in dance, and it just helped. And I'm to this day, I'm a walker. I like to be physically. Uh, I like to exercise. I like to keep it intact, and also keep my mind intact. So the way I've always healed from the trauma of my work was nature in action. Taking long walks, looking at birds and flowers and plants. And I feel the same way now. I can't just sit at home and do nothing. Um, I identified my career as my calling back in high school, and
Mhm.
it still is. And so I'm always overjoyed to help somebody find out, is this really for you? And it's not just, and I want to be very clear, it's not just medicine. This is something that I chose. It's not
Mhm.
for everybody. But I think it's very important that we show young people all the things that they can do, all the possibilities.
Mhm,
I'm very proud of the fact that my father was a mason. He was a brick maker. When I say
mhm,
mason, he made brick. He taught me the value of a solid foundation. And I'll share one brief story with you. I was asked to go to a career day in one of the schools when I was in Houston, and everybody, all these successful people were standing up on the stage and sitting, and I was the last one to enter. So I came down the center of the aisle, and I
mhm.
was dancing to James Brown.
Are you serious?
I was.
I didn't know you could dance. You never
I
danced at
wanted, I
parties.
wanted the students to understand you
Yeah.
don't have to lose your soul to have
Yeah.
a career, and you don't all have to do the same thing.
Right.
Do something that works for you, something that going to give you some freedom.
Right.
Learn how to manage your money. Learn how to manage yourself and keep yourself intact. And we don't have enough of anything now.
Right.
We don't look at the fact that our numbers are down everywhere. We don't represent
Right.
13% of anything. That's
Wow.
medicine, engineering, law. You know, whatever you're going to do, be good at it, be charitable, and do it well. So we need to continue to tell our young people, particularly our young women, we
Mhm.
don't have to go back to the days where we showed our bodies.
Come
We need
on.
to show the mind. We
Yeah.
need to focus on things that we can do, learn as much as we can, and then do it well.
Right. And I think that's what you just said. It just breaks my heart when I see our young girls just with their bodies, just whatever. I mean, and it just breaks my heart. But the things that we can do is, like you said, model through our lifestyle and giving back through the mentoring, speaking at different events at the church or at schools or whatever. We can give back in that way and save as many as we can.
That's
So
right.
I know you've mentored some girls and you and boys too is along the way. So do you have a particular as you reflect on the ladies and men that you've mentored, anybody that you just kind of jumps to mind? You might I know there's a lot of them that you'd like to share about their little story. How where have they gone? What have they become because of your impact in their life?
I'm very proud of one gentleman that has passed through Houston, Dr. Roger Mitchell. He worked at the
Okay.
Harris County Medical Examiners as one of the deputy chiefs. He went
Okay.
on to become the chief medical examiner of Washington, D.C., and he is
Okay.
now the chairman of pathology at Howard University College of Medicine. Uh,
Wonderful.
yeah, I always tell him how proud I am of him, and I want to see him keep going. And we have a young man who is now the chief medical examiner of Delaware, who is Black. And we have several people across the country now, and we have formed an international association of Black pathologists. And so we are in communication with Black pathologists on the continent of Africa, the Caribbean, and Canada, and the UK. So we're there, and we're there to mentor, we're there to support, we're there to offer wisdom that age has brought with us. So there's someone that we can send someone to talk to study with, to be mentored by. And so I'm proud that those numbers are not just one, but
Uh-huh.
many.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so, do you have any recommendations on where parents or students could get more information or get connected? Maybe we may have some medical students who might need a mentor, or can you give any
Yes,
information or suggestions?
absolutely. I always recommend that parents perhaps provide their children with a trip to the library, to look at books. There are many people like me who have written books. There are two organizations that have information online about becoming a medical examiner.
Mhm.
One is called the National Association of Medical Examiners. The
Mhm.
acronym is NAME.org. That's the National Association of Medical Examiners. They have information online about the field of forensic pathology. The other
Mm.
one is the American Academy of Forensic Science,
Mhm.
or AAFS.org, which is actually located in Colorado Springs, where I am. They
Okay.
also have online information about all the varieties of science that go into forensic science. And you can see that online. Then I also recommend for students that are in high school or in college to contact their local medical examiner or coroner's office to see if they can observe any activity there, or even to volunteer in that capacity. So there are many ways you can get an orientation to this industry. And of
Mhm.
course, to contact someone like me or somebody else online. I
Mhm.
usually do a virtual conference with students. I
Okay.
will at least involve the parents, so they know who's talking to their child on the internet. Let them see who it is.
Exactly.
So they, set up guidelines,
Mhm.
and that's how I keep in contact. And then parents and students contact me because
Mhm.
it's not the kind of thing you hear about all the time or you see. The reality of it is not always on TV. So I want
Mhm.
parents to understand what this is and to see if that is something that their child can look into or follow someone in there. But I always caution and make sure you know who's talking to your child online.
For sure. Oh my God, that's great information and suggestions there. Um, Let me ask you too about your books because I didn't get a chance to. I know you mentioned one of your books that you have. How many books have you written, and what? I guess if we just look at your name, we can probably find it, huh?
Um, I have done three books. The first
Okay.
one was my autobiography called My Strength Come From Within.
Mhm.
The second book is called I Speak for the Dead. I did both of those two books when I was in Houston.
I remember that one too. I speak for the dead.
Yeah. The third book is called Let Me Give You a Piece of My Mind, PEACE.
Ooh. Ooh, I like that.
And I did a book for Reverend Lawson
Mhm.
from Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church,
Okay.
which is a daily meditation book, and it's a wonderful book of all of his sermonettes. And
Right.
I'm getting ready to work on a fourth book um, called Not One of the Boys.
Oh my goodness. When is that one out? You know, I want that
I
one.
expect that to be out by the end of the year. Uh,
Okay.
it's
Well,
all
we
the
got to have you
all the
back to talk
things.
about that one. Not one of the boys. I
Not one of
love
the
it. I
boys.
love it.
Yes.
Because, I have a thing that's on the side of my bed, and I had to show it to my husband the other day because he asked me something, and we're talking kind of, he said, well, you women, and you this and that. And so he was teasing with me, but of course I said, you need to read the side of my bed. And it says, I have several, but one of them says, well-behaved women rarely make history. So I know that you were not one of those well-behaved women, or else you would never have made history. So, but I thank you so much for sharing with us today. One of the things too that I just got out of this early from the beginning, that we need to watch our mouths, because as you said, that gentleman was talking over you and saying these things and you could hear him. And then the counselor that said, this is not going to be for you, you can't do this, and so forth. So a lot of times we speak what we think, and we don't know what God has created this young person to do. So we as counselors, we as pastors and leaders of these young children, we should not speak what we feel, but see what it is they're interested in and help cultivate the way for it to happen. Because what could happen, they could have killed your dream and killed who God created you to be. So thank you to your mom, your grandmother, for their strong personalities and making sure that you had that great self-esteem, that you did not let people or what people say keep you from finding your dream and becoming this great woman that we see today. So We thank you so much for coming on. I think we've got a couple of minutes, about 2 minutes. So, is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience while we have a couple of minutes here?
Well, I want to thank you, Lady O, for this honor, and it's always a blessing to share my history, because we know young people will continue to make history. And I've always believed that if you've gotten to a certain level, you got to reach back and pull somebody up with you. And particularly for being Black, a Black American, if you can't see it, you cannot achieve it. So
Wow.
I think we need to show ourselves and be open to guiding those who are coming behind us. So thank you very much.
That is a wonderful, wonderful closing. And I just thank you so much for that because next week at church, we're going to be celebrating Women's History Month. And I did a t shirt, and on the back of it, it says, "They did, so I can." So you did, so we can. The girls coming along behind us, they can do it because you did it. You paved the way. And we want to honor you and thank you so much for all the sacrifices and the determination to stick in there and see it through to the end. We
Thank you.
honor you today and we thank you so much for everything and for your life. And we pray God's blessings upon you. And we've got to have that book. You got to come back again and share that book.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Blessings to you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Well, listen, guys, that's it today for Tea Talk. Wasn't that amazing? What I'd like for you to do is go ahead and start sharing to people, letting them know they have got to hear about this wonderful woman, Dr. Joye Carter. Listen, I'll see you next week for Tea at 3 with Lady O. Bye bye for now.